Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's January 6th. Today we celebrate the Scottish naturalist who walked 838 miles to London, and the birthday of a man who learned a great deal from growing peas. We'll learn about one of the most prolific plant collectors of Western Australia flora, and we'll celebrate what would have been the 75th birthday of a towering figure in the world of subtropical botany. Today's Unearthed Words feature thoughts on the new year from a variety of writers, and we grow that garden library with a book that Publishers Weekly said was a pleasure to read and a valuable resource for the enthusiastic gardener. I'll talk about a handy little garden item, inexpensive too, that can help with stem management for plants like orchids. And then we'll wrap things up with the birthday of a musician, artist, and gardener who co-founded one of the best rock bands of all time. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Thompson and Morgan shared a recent blog post called How to Make a Small Garden Feel More Spacious. They wrote, if you can hone down the style of your space in terms of color and style, keep the number of different materials used to a minimum, and then pare down your planting palette, you'll find the overall look is more coherent and pleasing. There's lots of other great tips in this post. So if you're looking for ideas on how to make your small space feel bigger, check out this post. It's in the free Facebook community for listeners of the show. If you're in that Facebook group, all you have to do is search for small, and this post will pop right up. Next up was a great post from the International Business Times with the heading, Colombian Botanist Risking His Life to Preserve Nature's Memory. This post is all about the botanist Julio Betancur, who's a 59-year-old biologist, university professor. Julio says it's worth taking risks so that his country can know about its biodiversity. And he said, every time I take a botanical sample, it's like writing a page in the book of our forests. Love that. He also said that in the future, once vegetation has disappeared from somewhere, people will know what species lived there at a certain time, and with that, we'll be able to reconstruct the natural history of the territory. There's much more in this post about Julio's work and his life. I loved this profile by the International Business Times. If you're interested in looking up this post for yourself in the Facebook group, just search for the word Colombian, and this post will pop up. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck, because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show in the Daily Gardener community. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just head on up to the search bar, type in Daily Gardener Community, and then our group will show up and you can request to join, and then I'll admit you to the group. And I'd love to meet you there in that space where you'll be able to see all of the articles that I curate for listeners of the show. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Scottish artist, naturalist, and ornithologist William MacGillivray, who was born on this day in 1796. MacGillivray once walked 838 miles from Old Aberdeen in Scotland to London to visit the Natural History Museum there. Along the way, MacGillivray documented all the flora and fauna he encountered, and you can read all about it in a book by Dr. Robert Ralph called A Walk to London. It's a fascinating read. And by the way, in his journal, MacGillivray also kept a tally of all the whiskeys he drank on the way to London. Right there at the bottom of each journal entry, MacGillivray would record 3 things: his miles walked that day, the total miles walked, and the number of whiskeys drank. Here's one humorous account from September 11th, 1819. He wrote, "As I have no botanical accounts for my readers tonight, I shall try to patch up a story somehow or other. My readers will recollect that I came here on a dark night, wet and weary, and at the door I met a woman of whom I inquired if I might stay the night. Like other honest women of her kind, she thought fit to scrutinize my exterior, so a candle was held up to my face, and a door then opened for me. The results of my examination were not favorable to me, as I was informed that I would be obliged to sleep with a man to whom she pointed to in bed. And as I grumbled, she told me to reconsider the matter. Well, it was either jump into bed with this old guy or stay outside." This journal entry was from day 5 of MacGillivray's long journey. He'd walked 0 miles, but he'd managed to drink 1 whiskey. And again, you can read all of MacGillivray's journal entries in the wonderful book by Dr. Robert Ralph called A Walk to London. MacGillivray was a professor of natural history at the University of Aberdeen from 1841 until his death. He founded the Zoology Museum, which still houses some of his specimens, and the MacGillivray Warbler is named in honor of MacGillivray. And today is the anniversary of the death of the Austrian botanist and monk Gregor Mendel, who died on this day in 1884. Gregor pioneered the study of heredity when he gave peas a chance. Sorry, couldn't resist. In all seriousness, Mendel discovered the basic principles of heredity through his experiments with peas in his garden at the Augustinian monastery that he lived in at Brno in the Czech Republic. During 7 years in the mid-1800s, Mendel grew nearly 30,000 pea plants, taking note of their height and shape and color, and his work resulted in what we now know as the laws of heredity. And Mendel came up with the genetic terms and terminology that we still use today, like dominant and recessive genes. And today is the birthday of the botanist and prolific plant collector Charles Austin Gardner, who was born on this day in 1896. Gardner was born in England, but his family immigrated to Australia in the early 1900s. Gardner had a tremendous love for plants and landscape painting. During his 20s, he received painting instruction and encouragement from the landscape painter J.W. Linton and the wildflower painter Emily Pellow. He created an impressive herbarium with nearly 10,000 specimens from all over Western Australia. Gardner helped start the Western Australia Naturalist Club, and although he'd become a repository for information about Western Australia flora, he sadly never published a book on the topic. Gardner received several honors and medals for his work, but much of his information about Australian plant geography, distribution, and biology was lost to us when he died. Today in Tamman, in Western Australia, there's a Charles Gardner Memorial that is surrounded by over 50 species of native wildflowers. And there's also the Charles Gardner National Park that was named in his honor. Today is the 75th anniversary of the American botanist Alwyn Howard Gentry, who was born on this day in 1945. Gentry's life was tragically cut short when his plane crashed in fog into a forested mountain during a treetop survey in Ecuador. At the time, Gentry was just 48 years old. He was at the peak of his career. Gentry was regarded as a towering figure in tropical biology, and he ranked among the world's leading field biologists. He was also the senior curator at the Missouri Botanical Garden. Theodore Parker III was also on the plane with Gentry. Parker was a world expert ornithologist. Parker's fiancée survived the crash, and she told a reporter that both Gentry and Parker had survived the crash as well. But sadly, they were both trapped in the wreckage of the plane, and without immediate medical attention, they passed away together the following morning. The only consolation for the many who knew and loved them was that Gentry and Parker both died doing what they loved. Throughout his professional life, Gentry had been in awe of the powerful pull of the rainforest, writing, "The Amazon is a world of lush green vegetation, and the abundant waters has inspired naturalists, fortune hunters, dreamers, explorers, and exploiters." According to Conservation International, Gentry had collected more specimens than any other living botanist of his time, a staggering 70,000 plants. To this day, botanists rely on Gentry's guide to the woody plants of Peru for understanding and direction when it comes to neotropical and tropical plants. In Unearthed Words, here are some verses about the beginning of the new year. From Edgar Fawcett, the American poet, "January is here with eyes that keenly glow, a frost-mailed warrior striding a shadowy steed of snow." And here's a verse on January from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. "Janus am I, oldest of potentates. Forward I look and backward, and below I count as god of avenues and gates, the years that through my portals come and go." Here's an excerpt from Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. "Time has no divisions to mark its passage. There is never a thunderstorm or blare of trumpets to announce the beginning of a new month or year. Even when a new century begins, it is only we mortals who ring bells and fire off pistols." And here are some thoughts on January from the author of The Country Garden, Josephine Noose. "Anyone who thinks that gardening begins in the spring and ends in the fall is missing the best part of the whole year. For gardening begins in January with the dream." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Garden Miscellany by Susan Staubeck. The subtitle to this book is An Illustrated Guide to the Elements of the Garden. Imagine a sweet garden dictionary that has the most adorable cover and is filled with beautiful illustrations, and then throw in wonderful garden history and botanical tidbits along with clear and simple definitions. And you have garden historian Susan Staubeck's delightful book, A Garden Miscellany. This book was a 2019 standout for me from a design standpoint. Julia Yellow did a marvelous job with the whimsical and striking illustrations. And Staubeck introduces her book this way. If gardens were musical compositions, this book would be a look at the notes. Gardens have many notes, many parts: paths, beds, borders, containers, pergolas, and plants. And not all gardens, of course, include the same elements, but they do include some combination. In Susan's alphabetical collection, A is for alley, derived from the French verb meaning to go. Alley refers to a straight walkway or avenue, a promenade, usually lined with trees and occasionally with shrubs. As a garden historian, Susan shares invaluable historical insights on each element in her book. For alley, she reminds us that the 17th century diarist, author, and gardener John Evelyn wrote that alleys must not be interrupted, and that their length alone affords a most gracious and pleasant perspective, while they serve to decline and concur at a point, especially if planted with tall trees. Nothing can be more ravishing and agreeable. In writing this delightful dictionary, Susan reflected, as I wrote, I wanted to add everything to my own garden. Oh, for a pond or a shepherd's hut. For a week, I thought nothing would do but a pavilion. Gardening is dreaming. Susan's book is one I find myself revisiting, and it is such a beautiful resource. It should be on your garden gift list to give or receive. And speaking of gifts for gardeners, today's great gift for gardeners is the Betancur 100-piece plant clip set. These clips are of high quality, they're non-toxic and eco-friendly. You can use them outdoors or for indoors plants, and they're suitable for small or medium-sized plants. The clips hold the stems of your delicate flowers securely. You can use them for tomato supports, for your orchids, vines, or seedlings. Just clip the stem to your stakes or your cages, anything that can provide support. And you can get the 100-piece pack for just $6.49 using the link in today's show notes. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the birthday of the guitarist, singer, songwriter, and co-founder of Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett, who was born on this day in 1946. After his immense success with Pink Floyd, Syd released 2 solo LPs and then disappeared into a self-imposed 30-year exile, where he spent most of his time painting and gardening. Before his life with Pink Floyd, Sid attended the Camberwell Art School. One of the pieces he created was a beautiful watercolor, a delicate-looking still life of a dried flower bouquet. In 2006, Sid died of cancer at the age of 60. Before he died, Sid was a patient at Addenbrooke Hospital in Cambridge. In 2017, his friend, the sculptor Stephen Pyle, and a garden designer named Paul Harrington were planning to install the Sid Barrett Garden at Addenbrooke. Stephen's sculpture for the garden depicts Sid riding his bicycle, hands-free, with a guitar in one hand and artist brushes in the other. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.